Allen in Apex, North Carolina. What an interesting name for a town. Apex, the place where points meet, right? Paul, I am learning a lot about the reason my GCD, which is a product we make, the Gainsell DAC, and my M1200 monoblocks, sweet amps, nice system, playing through a pair of Spatial Audio M4 Sapphires. Sorry, I don't know those speakers. But they are providing my first glimpse into that somewhat elusive, disappearing speaker 3D soundstage you always talk about. Nice. It sounds good. What he's saying, Alan is saying that he's getting a taste of how it feels to have your speaker system completely disappear and in its place, just the music. It is, the first time you hear that, it's a momentous event. It really, anyway, I won't go on about it. A key ingredient in creating that illusion is speaker setup. And that's where my question and confusion comes from. Common speaker setup advice has us moving speakers in fractions of inches and degrees of toe-in to achieve that best sound. Absolutely. In the Audiophile's Guide, my book on setup, I go through that extensively and give you examples of how to do it. Here's what it should sound like, and you play this record and you hear it. So, yep, very familiar with that. If the speaker position is so critical, why wouldn't ear position be just as critical? Wouldn't it mean I have to hold my head in a vice? This is one of the better questions I've had in a while. Thank you, Alan. It doesn't make a lot of logical sense, does it? So, in the Audiophile's Guide, my book and CD about how to set up stuff, we build a grid pattern with tape. I mean, it doesn't take half an hour. You put up a grid and you move your speakers around for best position, and then we get very, very detailed. We play this track, here's what you should listen for, and then you turn the speaker a little bit and you turn it a little bit more and you get it. I mean, we're talking inches here, right? In and out, move back. There's big moves, and then as you get down, it gets into smaller and smaller moves, and eventually you get this three-dimensional holographic image where the speakers disappear. The sound comes from behind the loudspeakers in this beautiful three-dimensional soundstage with depth, width, often, if you set it up right, goes beyond the loudspeakers, height, all that good stuff, right? And the funny part, what he's bringing up is, I can be sitting here in my hot seat, and I can move over here, and I can move over here. In our setup on the Aspen FR30s, you can move to the seat next to you, and it's a different viewpoint, but the speakers are still disappeared. You're just kind of looking at this three-dimensional image from the right side or from the left side. But if inches and fractions of a degree matter for the speakers, how come it doesn't matter for your ears, which is what you're actually pointing towards? So one of the simple answers to this is, I want you to imagine that on your speaker, instead of a tweeter, because we know tweeters have the shortest wavelength, and as you're moving at little bits, it's really your tweeter that you're really aiming, right? Replace that tweeter mentally with a flashlight. What happens with a flashlight? Well, a flashlight, a regular incandescent flashlight, LED, whatever you got, what happens to the beam? It spreads out like that, doesn't it? You have this pinpoint area, and then it spreads out. Now, these fractions of an inch or an inch that you're moving, you're going like this. There's a very broad flare out of sound that occurs from this pinpoint source. And the highest, and it kind of comes out like that. So the highest energy is hitting your ears, and that's why when I move over here, I'm still within the broad range of that flashlight, but I'm off to the side a little bit. It's a little bit less and a little bit less over here, which is why it sounds, from an illusion standpoint, as if I'm just looking at the same image, but from a side or from this side. And that's the biggest reason. Something else that's happening, and this is something we cover in the Audiophile's Guide, is your positioning of the speakers affects not only your listening position, but It affects the room. So in the guide, when we first start out, one of the first things we have you doing is putting on a track of a bass player, Chris Brunhaver, going up and down on the bass. And the instructions are to start from your center position and walk towards the speakers and away from the speakers until you find a spot in that room where the bass is pretty even. And that's where you put your chair, okay? So we are tuning when we move, and then we're eventually going to move the speakers back and forth, sometimes inches, to get the frequency response right at the listening position. And that listening position is fairly broad. Again, you've got the flare out of woofers, mid-ranges, and tweeters, but within the room, you have to be, sometimes 6 inches can make a lot of difference. I can move my head back and forth and hear definitely differences in frequency response in Music Room 3. So anyway, long-winded explanation, but that's the reason why inches matter here and feet matter here. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.